Missouri.
Springfield, Missouri. Okay, cool.
And I've started recording and I'm sitting here and I'm talking to Seth. And Seth was and is a member of the band Dumptruck. How are you today?
I'm doing good.
You're in Austin, Texas, right?
No, I moved last a year and a half ago. I moved to Albuquerque.
Albuquerque, what prompted that?
Well, it was like my wife and I were looking to get the hell out of Texas, and I'd been there 33 years, and I just couldn't take it anymore. Uh, Between the weather climate and the political climate, and like Austin being taken over by very rich tech bros, I just couldn't deal with it anymore. So we started looking around, and in the meantime, our guitarist had moved here, Alan Durham, I he's played with us for about, I don't know, close to 30 years on and off. Um, and so we came and visited here a few times, and we had checked out a bunch of other cities, and my wife and I both really liked it here. So the the weather's a lot more dealable. The political climate is better. It gets a bad rap sometimes, but it's a really beautiful place to live. You know?
Yeah, I've had a couple friends that have lived in Albuquerque and they loved it. Thought it was fantastic. They don't do the weather on the news because the weather's the same every day.
Well, it's the same, but it's always changing. It's like it you get like it can get not quite as hot as Texas and a hell of a lot less humid, so it's a lot more dealable. And like I grew up in the Northeast, and the winters there could be absolutely brutal. And the winters here are like, it's a nice, pleasant winter.
Yeah.
It can get a little chilly, but you don't get like feet of snow. And when you do get snow, it's the dry snow. It's not the slush
Yeah.
that like just lingers for weeks. So
Let's talk about Dump Truck. Okay.
let's
So
do that.
how did everything come about? First of all, I was blown up. This is a part of the our conversation where I gush
Okay.
because I've owned Positively Dump Truck for 40 years
Okay.
and I love that record. And what always struck me about that record is just the you guys seem so melodically different than everybody else that was out there. And I mean that like it's such a good way. It just you weren't the same as everybody else out there. You were. I felt like you were definitely cutting your own path.
We tried to. I mean, obviously you're bound by your influences to some degree, but we always wanted to try different stuff. We always were like really conscious of not just doing like straight three chord pop songs or rock songs, like trying to make them a little more interesting.
What were your influences?
Oh, they span a wide range. I mean, Kirk Swan and I started the band.
Hmm.
Um, we were both huge fans of television, of Fairport Convention, and Richard and Linda Thompson kind of stuff. You know, Certainly all the classic rock bands that everyone is influenced by, whether they want to be or not, because it's just
Yeah.
omnipresent. Um, really dug the Pretty Things. You know, it's weird. The whole "what are your influences" question is such a weird question, at least for me, because it's like I could give you completely different answers on successive days of the week, depending
Yeah.
on what my mood is like. But go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I mean, when I listened to Positively, you weren't you. I play I play so many different types of music and so much different things that people don't normally hear on my show, and there's a lot of people that are always trying to take that band and let's put them here because
Right.
that makes sense to them in their brain,
Right.
trying to pigeonhole. And I don't really particularly care for that. But when I listen to Dump Truck, there wasn't there even if my mind does go that direction, like, hey, let's put them someplace. There's no place I feel like I put you guys because you just sounded different and
Well,
good.
yeah, and it's the scene back then was it's interesting you say that because back then it was like geographically there were very different music scenes going on
Yeah.
all over the country, and that doesn't really exist now anymore with the internet. It's just all been kind of homogenized. But you had the Athens scene, and you had like the whole, North Carolina, like Winston-Salem kind of, less active scene, whatever, DBs. You had the Boston scene, you had the New York scene, and then the West Coast stuff, and it all sounded really different. And we would get so many times our hometown was just invented. And it was like, oh, they're part of the Athens, Georgia scene. Oh, they're part of this scene. And it's like, well, no, we were from Boston, and we always were from Boston back in the 80s.
Yeah.
But we got misidentified with so many different other scenes. Just because we didn't fit neatly into any one,
Yeah. And your sound certainly didn't fit neatly into any particular thing. I mean, it just the melodies are just very different than what I heard at that time. I guess I probably belabored the point on that. But one of the things I love about Dump Truck is when I looked at you guys, when I looked at the album, sit there and look at the album while I listened to it, and I'd watch the videos or whatever. You look like me. You look like guys that were just like me, and that helped me identify with you guys as a band.
Yeah, I could say, I mean, we had a manager once who wanted us to really like upgrade our looks. He wanted us to and we were like, no, this is what we are. This is what we are. And the next time we met with him, he just throws an LL Bean catalog at us and just was like, well, here, you can all use this and get clothes out of this. And we're like, look. And it turned out, he didn't last very long as our manager for that and other reasons.
One of the things that kind of blew me away was back in your early days, Mark Mulcahy played drums for you guys.
Right. Mark is one of my oldest friends, and I was just talking to him the other day. He and I were in a band in New Haven in the late 70s called Saucers, and he was the drummer. And then when we started Dump Truck initially, it was just me and Kirk, and Kirk and I would split off guitar and bass. Like I'd play bass on his songs and he'd play bass on my songs.
Mm-hmm.
And then we got Mark to play drums on half of the first record. And we even played a few gigs with him, but he was just getting Miracle Legion off the ground at that point. And then it was just like, well, you can't do both. We can't rely on you because obviously Miracle Legion's your priority. And they did some great records, and his solo records are awesome too.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
He's a very talented guy.
So one of the things I'm like really fascinated with is bands and their structure and how they survive. And you mentioned earlier that you and Kirk really started Dump Truck together, and for a long time you were the mainstays of that group. But what wanted to kind of touch on is that after Positively, because of some of the stress that was going on with just touring and recording and other things that were happening, Kirk left the band. And
Right.
so the last kind of that earlier run for Dump Truck is For the Country, and that's an album that's really all your songwriting on it.
Right.
And I listened to the record again this morning. And a few weeks back when we first made contact with each other, I went and I listened to all 3 albums all the way through, and there's this just really nice progression for the band and for the country's a criminally unknown album, in my opinion. I don't mean to insult you, but I think it's a great record. I like I like the touches of you actually bringing in some country sounds to the record, and
Right.
they don't, and a lot of times people do that and they sound forced. This
Right.
sounded very natural. Do you think Kirk leaving the band helped you? I mean, I'm sure it was probably hard at the time, but helped you as a songwriter?
It definitely put a lot more pressure on me because I've never been the most prolific songwriter, you know. But you know, when Kirk left the band, at first we're like, all right, what are we gonna do? Because Spike Brigham, who had been playing bass with it, he wasn't on the record. Steve had already left the band before the last few tours, but Spike Brigham, who was also someone Kirk and I knew for years from New Haven. So he and Kirk both left at the same time, and me and Sean Devlin, the drummer, were just like, what are we going to do? And then we talked with the label, and the label had already had plans to do a new record, to do a third record. And they were like, well, we're still into it. Get a band together and we're on. And, you know, if you want to do a record with Hugh Jones, that's a possibility. And that was a big kick in my ass because it was like, at that point, Hugh Jones was one of my favorite producers. I really loved that record, Heaven Up Here by Echo and the Bunnymen. I thought that was like just an amazing record, just the way it flowed from start to finish. And I was like, yeah, I want to work with that guy. And I maybe had a half dozen songs together at that point, and I was like, okay, I've got to get another 6 or 8 songs together so we can make a record. And it definitely lit a fire under my ass, you know.
I think it's interesting. Sorry, the lights went out in here. I'm going to wave and get
a complete mood change here.
Yeah, a complete mood change here. How was Hugh Jones different than your experience working with Don Dixon?
He was like 180 degrees different. For one thing, we had like 2 or 3 times the amount of time and a much bigger, a much more serious studio. I mean, the drive-in studio was great, but it was a garage studio. You know, it had a 16-track 2-inch, but Rockfield was like a complex with 2 complete studios and, you know, beautiful 24-track setup, like anything instrument-wise we wanted, we could rent or get a hold of. And so when we first went in with Hugh Jones, we sat down with him. You know, we had flown over to England. We had never met the guy before. And we've got like 3 or 4 days of pre-production and then going out in London and then going out to do the record in Wales. And we sat down and talked with him, and he's like, one of the first things he said was, all right, look, you know, the last record, you had like acoustic guitars doubling the rhythm guitars on almost every song. If you want to put an acoustic guitar on this record, you can, but you're going to have to justify it to me. It's like, it's not like we're just going to throw a bunch of shit on here. And we're going to be very intentional about what we're doing. And he was just like, technically, he was amazing. I mean, for the initial, all the basic track sessions, he was pretty much engineering. He might have had an assistant, but he wasn't like one of these hands-off producers that's just sitting back in a chair,
Yeah.
And we would do takes of songs, and some songs we'd do 2 or 3 takes, and he'd be just like, all right, just go to the rec room and play pool for an hour, okay, and then come back. And he would take verses out of one and choruses out of another and put together a take that was amazing. It was like just the rhythm track, but it was like sounded fucking great and the feel was perfect, and I had never seen anyone cut up 2-inch tape like that before,
Yeah.
And just he had a really good instinct. Like, if some ideas we'd come up with and he'd be like, oh yeah, that's perfect. That's great. And some he'd be like, I don't know, maybe try this. And he just did a great job of getting really good performances out of all of us.
Do you think being in Wales and being kind of out of your comfort zone with, being not being in America, not being someplace that you're overly familiar with, that kind of added to the sense of that record?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was like we were out in this small town in Wales. I think it is Monmouth, and I think it was like a population of about 1,100 people. And everything is, I mean, there's like castle ruins and all these like stone remains of structures and stuff. And it was like that was the only thing we were doing. There was no distractions. It was in this beautiful part of the country, and you just focus on one thing and one thing only. It wasn't like you were getting calls from someone, you were watching TV or anything like that. It was just that's what we were there to do. And when we were at the drive-in, yes, we were away from home, but we weren't anywhere near as isolated, and so you still had distractions, And in Wales, I just felt like, we didn't have any distractions. This is the only thing in the world right now is doing this record.
What led Big Time Records to say Dumptruck and Hugh Jones? What made them go, this is the combination?
I don't know. It was like there was a meeting I remember with it was with me and maybe the whole band and the record company president, this guy. I'm not even going to say his name because of what happened afterwards.
Yeah, we'll talk about that in a minute.
But and then we sat down and they were like, I think the guy's name, the first guy they suggested was I think his name was Pat Moran or something like that. Yeah. And I had heard some of the stuff that he had done. It wasn't up our alley at all. And I was just like, well, they're talking about putting up, a couple $100,000 to make a record, which, considering we had done Positively for maybe 10 or 12 grand, it was a lot of money to put up there. But I was like, what else? Who else you got? He's like, well, I mean, we could go with Hugh Jones if you want. And I was just like, yeah, that would be great. So it was like it all happened in the space of about 20 minutes or a half hour, where it was like, we went from not knowing what the hell we're doing to be like, oh, okay, yeah, we're making a record with Hugh Jones. That's awesome.
We're going to go Wales and record a record with Hugh Jones. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. But let's get to the bad part of the dump truck story.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, because you've got this amazing trajectory. They're giving you a bigger budget to produce a record. They're sending you to Wales. You're working with Hugh Jones, but behind the scenes, Big Time was not doing so well.
No, No, and I mean, we started seeing signs of it even while we were in the middle of the recording, where like the A&R guy from Big Time, who I had known from Boston before he worked for Big Time. He was a friend of mine. And he was supposed to fly over during the recording. He was supposed to hang out for a few days or a week in Wales. And that never happened. And then he was fired or let go. And, there was a little few hiccups about like bills getting paid at the studio and shit like that. And it all got worked out, but it was just like delays. Like you notice when a company starts to go under, and which I didn't know at the time. I was, I wasn't that young, but I hadn't been through seeing companies fall apart.
Yeah.
And so there was just like little hiccups then, but they'd get resolved. And I think we recorded the album in like May and June. We recorded and mixed it in May or June of '87. And then we came back to the States, and the plan was we were going to go on the road in September, end of August, early September, to coincide with the record's release and tour for 3 months. And when we had toured like the previous couple of years on Positively, the label was totally fucking on top of it. And I don't, do I have to be careful about blue language?
No,
Okay.
go ahead. You say what you want to say.
And they would have so many interviews set up, so many radio interviews, press interviews, in-store appearances. Our record was in the record stores in the towns we were playing. I mean, they did an awesome job on Positively. So when we went out on the road for the country, it was immediately noticeable how much shittier the record company support was. It went from like 2 or 3 interviews a day to doing 2 or 3 interviews a week. It was like the record wasn't in the stores in the towns we were playing in. People at the label who had been doing like publicity and press and radio promotion, bunch of them were getting let go. Tour support checks were a week or 2 late. That kind of thing. And so we're on the road and we're having like a real kind of a disaster of a tour, not in terms of playing, but just in terms of logistics.
Yeah.
We had like a week into the tour, at the behest of our manager, we had gotten a bigger van. Okay. And the van we had before had never stranded us ever in like 4 years of playing gigs. It had never left us stranded. So our manager sets us up with this van that another band he managed was selling. And yes, exactly. And it's a great deal. And it only has 30,000 miles on it and everything. We had so many breakdowns. We had 5 flat tires. It turns out they had put retreads on the thing. We had a catch on fire one day. I mean, it was just like a complete nightmare. And then added to that there was just no record company support as far as press, radio, anything. And we had seen what it was like when there was good press and good radio support. So, it was just like, we knew this is fucked up. And we also knew that, like, we didn't know the exact date, but we knew that, like, they should have picked up the option on our contract. It's either just passed or it's about to come up, and they haven't exercised their option, because the way, you know, record company contracts worked back then is they'd sign you for 7 records, but it would be 1 record with an option for 6 more individual terms. And they had to exercise that option by sending our lawyer or us and our lawyer a registered letter saying, we are picking up your option. And I was a fucking idiot, basically. And a friend of mine, good friend of mine, someone who, amazingly enough, I'm still good friends with, had previously managed us, and he had stopped managing us when he went to work for the label. And I was talking with him one day, and I was just like, hey, Jim, is there any way, and this is my stupidity, because I should have just immediately called our lawyer and asked him, but it was like, oh, if I call the lawyer, I'm going to start getting into hourly rates,
Yeah.
And we're in the middle of a tour. It's not like, oh, I had it all on my phone or something like back then,
Yeah.
So I was like, hey, Jim, is there any way you can find out when our option date is without letting anyone else know? And he was like, yeah, no problem. And what did he do? He asked a friend of his who was the VP, hey, when's Dumptruck's option up? And it turned out the option date had already passed. They were 2 weeks late on it already. Okay. So we get to LA on our tour, and they've got us scheduled for a day in the office, like little meet and greet, signing things for people, shit like that.
Mm-hmm.
We go to the record company office, and the record company president just grabs me and pulls me aside and says, hey, come here, I got to talk to you about something, and pulls me into his office. And he's just like, hey, I just realized, we forgot to pick up we didn't pick up your option, but we definitely want to. That's not going to be a problem, is it? And I'm just totally put on the spot. And what's going on in my head is, okay, we're owed a few $1,000s in tour support right now. In 4 days, we're scheduled to fly from San Francisco to London and play a week of dates, and that's all on the record company's dime. And if I just say, no, we want out right now, all of that can get pulled. All our tour support road we'll probably never see.
Yeah.
And so I gave him an answer that was completely honest. I said, look, I can't give you an answer right now. I can't answer for the whole band. I have to talk to the band. I've got to talk to our manager, and I've got to talk to our lawyer, and I can't give you an answer right now. And just left it like that. And that was it. That was the last I heard about it from him at that point. And that's probably October of 87. Okay. So we're on tour for another month and a half. And we get home like the first or second week of December. And we finish the tour. And I start hearing rumors. Meanwhile, Big Time had just pretty much fired almost everybody at that point. And it's like really obvious they're going under. So we were like Just like, well, they didn't pick up our option. I haven't committed to anything, whatever. We'll take a break after this tour, and beginning of the year, we'll start figuring what's up. And then I start hearing rumors that Dumptruck has signed to Phonogram UK. And I know nothing about it, but I'm hearing it from a couple of different people. And so I talked to our lawyer, and I'm like, I don't know what's going on, but I keep hearing these rumors, and I don't know what's going on. The lawyer was up to date on the whole option thing. He was like, they didn't pick up the option. And even if you had said yes in the office in LA, it doesn't matter, because that has to be signed. That has to be signed. It has to be a contract extending it. They can't just forget to pick up the option and just get a verbal assent from you. So it doesn't matter what you said. And so he starts making some phone calls and finds out that basically, I'll use his name. What the fuck? Fred, the head of Big Time, has been shopping us around to labels and has a deal set up with Phonogram UK to basically sell us to them. And so, I think our lawyer got in touch with him and was like, what's going on here? And, they had a clause in our contract that basically, if they sold us to someone else, they basically got 50% of the deal. Okay. And what Phonogram was offering was like 100,000 pounds, which is like 200 grand US. And Fred wanted to just take 100 grand off the top. And, Phonogram was expecting us to, if they're giving us 200 grand, they're expecting us to spend 100 grand making a record. They're not expecting, they're not expecting, 10 grand. So we're like, well, you take 100 grand and we spend 100 grand making a record, and there's nothing for the band, and that's not going to work. And he was firm on it. And so our lawyer contacted Phonogram UK and said, hey, we understand you trying to sign Dumptruck through Big Time, and Dumptruck would love to do the deal with you, but Big Time doesn't own the rights to them, and they would like to just do it direct. And Phonogram was like, well, why don't you send all the paperwork on this to our New York office lawyers and have them look it over, and we'll let you know. And we did that. They looked it over. They said, yeah, Big Time doesn't own them anymore. They fucked up. And so Phonogram's ready to go ahead with it. Meantime, Fred hears this, and of course, it's bullshit. And he just basically says, all right, well, I'm going to sue you, and I'm going to tie you up for years, and let's do it. And he files suit, and he sues us for $5 million and serves us papers on the suit. He sues Phonogram UK for $10 million, but doesn't serve them papers, basically saying to them, if you don't back Dumptruck in the lawsuit, we'll leave you out of it. But if you start funding Dumptruck's end of the lawsuit, then we're coming after you too. And Phonogram, who had already told us they thought we were 100% in the right, was basically gone in 24 hours. I mean, not returning phone calls from us, basically just cutting loose. And so we're left being sued, but for $5 million by Big Time. Meanwhile, Big Time is thinking, Oh, okay. Phonogram's just playing turtle, and as soon as the lawsuit's over, they're going to sign with them. They're just playing it really sly. So they wouldn't give up the lawsuit against us because they really thought the money was still there. And Fred was just took it personally and was like, "No, I'm going to tie you up for years," and he did. He tied us up for about 2.5 years until basically what ended the lawsuit was they stopped paying their lawyers, and after about 3 months of not getting paid, their lawyers stopped showing up for hearings, and we got a default judgment, and basically got awarded close to $250,000 from Big Time, and we're able to collect about 2,300. So that was it. But in the meantime, like, I think the lawsuit was filed in '88, and probably late 1990, it was ended. But in that time, like, the whole indie music scene had shifted quite a bit,
Yeah.
and like the kind of stuff we were doing was a lot less in favor, and everything was moving towards Nirvana, Soundgarden, the whole Seattle scene and everything, which we didn't really align with much, and so we had a record that we finished in like 91. We had started it maybe in 90 or something, because we weren't supposed to be recording while the lawsuit was going on, because it could just get claimed by the label in the worst case, and we finished that, and we thought, okay, well, we finished the album, and it's a good album, and we should be able to license it. And no one was interested. And whether it was like the shifting music climate, I'm sure was part of it. And I think part of it was like we kind of got a little bit blackballed from a label sense point of view, just because we were the band that fought back when a label sued us, and we won. Even if we didn't win anything, we won.
Didn't somebody in a suit against Big Time claim your music too?
Well, that happened later. After our whole thing was settled, we got awarded like all our masters back, in addition to the money which we couldn't collect. And Big Time had been distributed by RCA in the latter part of our dealings with them. And so we went to get our masters back, and RCA stepped in and said, "Oh no, we have a lien on that from the licensing deal." Because I mean, Big Time had just siphoned off. The Fred guy had just basically embezzled, it's his company, but he embezzled a lot of money that RCA had given him like $1 million to sign a bunch of bands. And during the lawsuit, we got to see the books, and it's like, oh, the marina slip for his yacht, the repairs on his Bentley, all that. Tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars. So RCA was like, "No, you can't have the tapes back." And then a few years later, the Hoodoo Gurus, who had been on Big Time, and they were signed to Big Time Australia, and they had sued Big Time, and they ended up winning the company. They basically they owned Big Time at the end of that lawsuit, and they were completely cool, and they basically had control of the master tapes and sent them back. Just reached out to all the bands they knew how to get a hold of and said, "Hey, do you want your master tapes back? We have no interest in your catalog. You should have it. And sent it all back to us.
Well, that's very cool.
That was very cool. Yeah.
Was at what point did you kind of go? Because I mean, I know dump trucks still exist today, but there's a point there after the lawsuits, after you recorded a record that dump truck came to an end. And at what point did you say, okay, this is it for me. I need to move. I'm going to do something else now.
Well, I moved to Texas in 91, and it was like right as we finished the Days of Fear record. And, we talked about it with the other two guys who were in the band at that point. It was Brian and Sean Devlin, the same drummer we'd had for years. We were like, well, look, we got this record done. None of us wanted to go the route of DIY and putting it out ourselves and going out on the road on that basis. And we're like, let's see if we can get this record put out. Let's see if we can license it to someone. And if we can and we can get a decent tour, then, we can work out the fact that I'm in Austin and you guys are in Boston. And we could just get together and rehearse for the tour and do it. And if we can't do it on that level, then fuck it. And at the same time, I got married. I was playing a little bit with my first wife. She played violin and I was playing guitar. And I was really, we had run ourselves ragged touring during the whole lawsuit because we had to pay the lawyers, and so I was really sick of touring. I had just gotten a house in Austin and just felt like doing some other stuff. And we tried for years to get that record licensed and put out, and it was like 94 or 95 before it finally saw the light of day. And we did a couple of, at that point I got a version of the band together down there just to do a few short tours. But it was obvious things had changed a whole lot, and it was going to be a really long climb trying to get back to where we were. And I was just like, I really like doing this, but it's getting old in terms of like driving around in a van all the time, sleeping on people's floors, just really scraping by trying to do it. And I was just like, I'll have a version of the band and we'll play some local gigs. We'll play selected things if the opportunity's there, but I don't want to do it. I can't do it on the level we were doing it for 7 years or whatever, and I was it just
just kind of
yeah.
And that's what I mean. I've always been curious about that. I mean, I think people, I always look at bands and go, the Beatles are the perfect example of a band existence. They are what they are musically, but just the climb and then the end.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of cases, it's more of an oomph than it is anything else. It's more like, okay, well, I guess we're done now kind of thing. So
right.
I'm always fascinated by that. Let me ask you this too. I mean, are you still in touch with Kirk? Do you guys ever would consider maybe writing songs together again?
I don't know if we write songs, but yes, I am in touch with Kirk. We were supposed to do this mini reunion thing. This was like, about 5 years ago. And it was basically a really good friend of ours was having a 60th birthday party. We were both planning on going. And various members of rhythm sections were going to be there. So we were like, all right, we'll do like a short reunion set. And we had it all set up. And about, I don't know, a few weeks or a month before I went up there, because it was in Boston, I was cooking and I sliced my finger, like this finger on my left hand, like literally right across there, like almost cut the tip off.
Oh wow.
It had 4 stitches in it. So when I ended up going up there, I still couldn't play guitar yet. So we did some songs, and a friend filled in on some of the guitar parts and stuff, and I sang with him, but I couldn't play guitar. We had it all planned out. And
Well, so what do you do these days? What do you do? What's Seth do these days to keep himself happy and having a good time?
well, I work on various oddball music things. I still have a version of Dump Truck. It's kind of a different kind of thing, what we've been doing lately, because we have a 5-piece with a keyboard player,
Mm-hmm.
which has been really nice. And I've been playing one of those Fender Telecaster Acoustasonics. I don't know if you're familiar with those, but it's like a hybrid guitar.
Okay.
It looks like a Telecaster, but it's got a little sound hole, and it gets very, very nice acoustic sound. Plays a little more like an electric. And so and then Alan, of course, plays full on electric, but it's given a lot of different textures, and it's kind of cool. I like that. I like the way it's been sounding with that. And we play around occasionally. We're doing a gig in Santa Fe in a couple of weeks. And then we're doing, then Alan and I are going to fly out east in the end of August. And we're playing a couple of gigs out east, but that will be the full electric thing with the rhythm section from Boston.
Oh, awesome.
And then aside from that, I've been working on a project with a friend of mine. I don't know if you've ever heard of the band Speedball Baby.
Familiar, yeah.
Their lead singer, Ron Ward, is an old friend of mine. And we've been working on this project where it's all covers, and he'll just like record an a cappella vocal into his phone and send it to me, and I'll put a backing track on it. But it has, of course, it's not time aligned to any beat or anything, so it's all completely free form, and it's very warped versions of songs that maybe you'd recognize what song it was. But it's been really fun to do because it's just working from such a different standpoint,
Yeah. And I know that you guys, Dump Truck has put out a few records post
Yes.
the original period, and you've done some things. I think last I saw you put out one in not too long ago.
2018 was the last one we did. Yeah.
Yeah. Any future plans to record?
We started on a few things. We had maybe we did this thing where we recorded like 4 or 5 songs, and 3 of them are mostly done. And we've just been so like busy working up this new version of the band. But yeah, we should do some more recording. I would like to do some more recording. I got to see what we have Alan and I both have some version of a recording setup. Alan has a bigger one than I do, but it would be really nice to just go into a studio, at least for basic tracks, and have someone else dealing with everything. The recording yourself is really cool, and it's great that you can like get equipment that you can do it at home now these days. But there's something to be said, like you were asking about in Wales. there's something to be said for the isolation and just like only working with the side of your brain that's making the music and not working with the side of the brain that's trying to figure out why it's not getting recorded the way you want it to. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
exactly. Seth, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me. I am sorry that it took so long for us to finally get together.
Oh,
And just know that you have a big fan of Dump Truck right here in Springfield, Missouri.
well,
That,
awesome.
like I said, I've had that album positively for 40 years, and I played it on the radio for the last 17 years, off and on. And as I said, I went back and I listened to all those first three albums, and they really do stand up the test of time. And I it is uh, it's almost, I would say, kind of Shakespearean in a way. Your career with the band Dump Truck is at this moment when people should be like fawning over you for the release of For Country. Everything's falling apart around you, and you didn't get the support you deserve. But all great records, and I do really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me today.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Is this isn't going live now, is it? Or is it?
It is not going to go live.
No, no.
I'm going to put it. I'm going to break it down, and I'll probably play bits of it on the show, and then I'll probably turn the rest of it into a podcast so people can see a full conversation. Because I I don't I don't when I sit down to talk to you today, I had no idea if we were going to talk for 5 minutes or we're going to talk for what we've talked for almost an hour now. And I'd like people to see that whole thing, a whole conversation. So
Sure.
I will save it as a podcast out there.
Well, I'm glad I didn't do it in my pajamas then.
I wish you all the best, and I will probably reach out to you again and see if we can have some further conversations. Okay.
Absolutely, I'd love to.
And if you talk to Mark Mulcahy, tell him to pay attention to his Facebook page because I've reached out to him to have a conversation. So,
Okay, I'll mention it to him.
all right. You
All
have a
right,
great day. Okay.
you too.
Thank you. How do I save the session in StreamYard?
Oh
Well,
boy.
I've got another interview ready to start
Oh my
next.
gosh, I don't know. I've never used StreamYard. What do you have to end it first, right? End recording. And then maybe it'll give you a save option. Okay, now end recording. Now let's see what happens. Recording.